The gunshot that shattered the saloon window missed Amara Reed's head by 3 inches, and she barely flinched as glass rained down on the dusty floor of the Columbia gambling hall. It was 1878, and trouble had a way of finding her no matter how many miles she put between herself and Kansas City. She grabbed the leather satchel at her feet and bolted through the back door into the California afternoon, her dark hair coming loose from its pins as she ran. The shouts behind her grew louder, and she knew the men chasing her would not stop until they got what they wanted. The $15,000 she had taken from her dead husband's safe before his business partners could claim it as their own. She collided hard with something solid and warm, stumbling backward as strong hands caught her arms to steady her. Amara looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face beneath a worn Stetson. The cowboy who had caught her was tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy blonde hair that curled slightly at his collar and a concerned expression that seemed genuine. "Easy there, miss," he said, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through the chaos around them. "You all right?" "I need to go," Amara gasped, trying to pull away, but his grip remained firm without being painful. "Those men after you." He glanced past her shoulder at the 3 figures emerging from the saloon, their faces twisted with anger. "Please, just let me go. You do not want any part of this." The cowboy studied her face for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled her close against his side, his arm around her shoulders in a gesture that looked almost protective, and turned to face the approaching men. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" His tone was pleasant enough, but Amara could feel the tension in his body, ready for whatever came next. The leader of the 3, a scarred man named Dutch Harrigan, stopped a few feet away. "That woman's got something belongs to us. Hand her over and there will be no trouble." "Funny thing about that," the cowboy said, and Amara could hear the hint of steel beneath his easy drawl. "The lady seems rather set on leaving. Maybe whatever dispute you have should be settled legal-like through the marshal." Dutch spat in the dirt. "This is none of your concern, stranger." "Well, you see, I am making it my concern." The cowboy's hand rested casually near his hip, where a well-worn Colt revolver sat in its holster. "Name's Kane Bishop. I work the cattle trail between here and Sacramento, and I've got a powerful dislike for men who chase down women in broad daylight." The standoff stretched for several heartbeats. Amara held her breath, acutely aware of the warmth of Kane's body against hers, the steady rhythm of his breathing. She had learned long ago not to trust men, especially ones who played hero, but something about this stranger made her want to believe he was different. Finally, Dutch backed down with a curse. "This is not over. That money is ours by right." "Then I am sure a judge will see it your way," Kane called after them as they retreated. He waited until they disappeared around a corner before releasing Amara, though he kept himself positioned between her and the street. "You want to tell me what that was about?" Amara clutched the satchel tighter, debating how much truth to share. His open, honest face made her want to confess everything, but experience had taught her better. "It is complicated. Most things worth fighting for are." Kane tilted his head, studying her with those impossibly blue eyes. "You got somewhere safe to go." "Not really." The admission cost her pride, but lying seemed pointless now. "There is a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Chen runs it, takes in folks who need a quiet place to stay. Tell her Kane sent you and she will get you a room, no questions asked." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a few bills. "This should cover a week." Amara stared at the money, then at him. "Why are you helping me? You do not know anything about me. I could be a thief or worse." "Could be." Kane's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "But those men were armed and angry and you are just scared. That tells me enough." He pressed the bills into her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "Besides, seems to me you could use a friend right about now." "I will only bring you trouble and sorrow," Amara said quietly, meaning every word. Trouble followed her like a shadow, had followed her since the day she married Victor Reed, thinking she was escaping her circumstances, only to discover she had walked straight into a nightmare. Kane met her gaze without flinching. "I will take whatever comes with you." The simple declaration, spoken with such certainty, hit Amara like a physical blow. No one had ever said anything remotely like that to her before. Her throat tightened with unexpected emotion, and she had to look away before he could see the tears threatening to spill. "You do not mean that," she whispered. "Madam, I do not say things I do not mean." He took a step back, giving her space. "Mrs. Chen's place is the blue house with white shutters. You go get yourself settled, and I will check in tomorrow, make sure those fellows are not bothering you anymore." Before Amara could protest or thank him or do anything sensible, Kane tipped his hat and walked away, leaving her standing in the alley with her heart racing and her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. She found the boarding house exactly where he said it would be. Mrs. Chen was a tiny Chinese woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner who took one look at Amara's disheveled appearance and showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor without asking a single question. Amara locked the door behind her, set the satchel on the bed, and finally allowed herself to shake. The money in that bag was her only chance at a new life. Victor Reed had made his fortune through schemes that skirted the edge of legality, dealing in stolen goods and taking advantage of minors who struck gold but lacked business sense. When a bar fight turned deadly, and Victor ended up with a knife in his chest 3 weeks ago, Amara had felt nothing but relief. She had taken the money from his safe because she had earned it through 2 years of being his possession, his trophy, his punching bag when the whiskey made him mean. His partners had other ideas about who deserved that money, and they had tracked her from Kansas City to Nevada to California, getting closer each time she thought she had escaped. Dutch Harrigan was Victor's cousin, and he seemed to take personal offense at Amara's continued existence. She had been running for 3 weeks now, sleeping with one eye open, never staying anywhere more than a couple of days. And now this stranger, this cowboy with kind eyes and a protective streak, had inserted himself into her mess. Amara did not know whether to be grateful or terrified. Men who played hero usually wanted something in return, and she had nothing left to give except the money she needed to survive. Sleep came in fits and starts that night. She woke before dawn, dressed quickly, and went downstairs to find Mrs. Chen already preparing breakfast in the kitchen. The older woman pointed to a chair at the small table and set a plate of eggs and fresh bread in front of Amara without being asked. "The cowboy who sent you here, Kane Bishop, he is a good man," Mrs. Chen said as she poured tea. "Helped my son when some drunk miners tried to rob him last year. Did not want thanks or payment, just made sure my boy got home safe." "How long have you known him?" Amara asked, hungry for information about the man who had appeared out of nowhere to defend her. 3 years, maybe 4. "He comes through Columbia regular, bringing cattle to the buyers in Sacramento. Always polite, always pays his bills on time, never causes trouble." Mrs. Chen gave her a knowing look. "Whatever you are running from, you could do worse than having Kane Bishop on your side." "I am not looking to drag anyone else into my problems," Amara said firmly. "Maybe not, but problems have a way of needing solving whether we want help or not." Mrs. Chen returned to her cooking, leaving Amara to contemplate her tea and the uncomfortable truth of those words. Kane appeared around mid-morning, knocking softly on the boarding house door. Mrs. Chen, let him in with a smile and called up the stairs for Amara. She came down slowly, acutely aware of how her simple blue dress made her eyes look darker, how her heart was beating too fast for a simple encounter with someone who meant nothing to her. "Morning," Kane said, holding his hat in his hands. "Thought maybe you could use some company. Figure those men might think twice about approaching you if you are not alone." "I cannot ask you to play bodyguard," Amara protested, even as part of her wanted desperately to accept. "You are not asking. I am offering." He said it so simply, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Besides, I have got a few days before I need to head back to the ranch. Might as well spend them making sure a lady can walk around town without fear." Something warm unfurled in Amara's chest, something she thought Victor had beaten out of her years ago. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of trust. "Why are you really doing this?" Kane was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes serious. "My mother spent 5 years married to a man who made her life hell. By the time she found the courage to leave him, she had nowhere to go and no one to help her. She died that winter, alone and cold, because people turned away when she needed help most." His jaw tightened. "I swore I would never walk past someone who needed help, not if I could do something about it." The raw honesty in his voice made Amara's throat constrict. "I am sorry about your mother." "Me too." He cleared his throat, the moment of vulnerability passing. "So, what do you say? Will you let me buy you breakfast and show you around Columbia, properly this time without anyone shooting at you?" Despite everything, Amara found herself smiling. "I have already eaten, but I would not mind a walk." They spent the morning wandering the bustling streets of Columbia, which had grown from a rough mining camp into a proper town over the past decades. Kane pointed out the various establishments, told her stories about the colorful characters who ran them, and managed to make her laugh more than once with his dry observations about human nature. "That there is old Pete," Kane said, nodding toward an ancient prospector sitting outside the general store. "Claims he found a gold nugget the size of his fist back in '49. Every year the nugget gets bigger in the telling. By my estimation, it should be the size of a watermelon by 1880. "You do not believe him?" Amara asked, amused despite herself. "Oh, I believe he found something, just maybe not quite as impressive as he remembers." Kane grinned at her, and she felt that dangerous warmth spread through her chest again. They were passing the church when Dutch Harrigan stepped out of an alley, blocking their path. This time he had 4 men with him instead of 3, and they all looked ready for violence. "Thought about what you said yesterday," Dutch drawled, his hand resting on his gun. "Decided I do not much care what some drifting cowboy thinks. That woman stole from us, and we are taking back what is ours." Kane moved so quickly Amara barely saw it. One moment he was beside her, the next he was between her and Dutch, his own weapon drawn and leveled with steady precision. "And I decided I do not much care for thieves who hide behind claims of ownership. That money was in her husband's safe, which makes it legally hers as his widow. You want to dispute that, take it up with a judge. Victor owed us," one of the other men snarled. "He died before he could pay his debts." "Debts for what?" Kane asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "What exactly did Victor Reed owe you money for?" The question hung in the air, and Amara watched Dutch's face redden with anger. She knew the answer, knew these men had been Victor's partners in smuggling and theft, knew they could not take their claim to any legitimate court. "That is none of your concern," Dutch finally said. "Sure it is. Because if those debts were for illegal activities, then you have got no legal claim at all." Kane's gun never wavered. "Now, I am going to count to 3, and then you are going to turn around and walk away. And if I see you anywhere near this lady again, I am going to have a long conversation with Marshall Taylor about what kind of business you and Victor Reed were really conducting. The standoff lasted longer this time. Amara could see Dutch calculating odds, weighing whether he could draw fast enough to take Kane down. Finally, he spat in the dirt again and backed away, his men following. "You just made an enemy," Dutch called over his shoulder. "Hope she is worth it." Kane did not holster his weapon until they were completely out of sight. When he finally did, Amara saw his hand was perfectly steady, as if he had not just faced down 5 armed men. "You could have been killed," she said, her voice shaking with reaction. "But I was not." He turned to her, his expression gentle. "Are you all right?" "No." The word burst out before she could stop it. "No, I am not all right. You do not understand what you have gotten involved in. These men, they will not stop. They will keep coming, and they will hurt anyone who gets in their way. You need to walk away from me before you end up dead in some alley." "Already told you," Kane said quietly. "I will take whatever comes with you." "Why?" Amara demanded, frustration and fear making her voice sharp. "You do not know me. You owe me nothing. Why would you risk your life for a stranger?" Kane was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with those 2 blue eyes. When he spoke, his voice was low and earnest. "Because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. I see someone brave enough to run from a bad situation, strong enough to keep going even when the whole world seems set against her. And maybe I am a fool, but I think maybe you see something in me too, something that makes you want to trust me even though you have got every reason not to." Amara's breath caught. He was right. God's help her, he was right. She did trust him against all logic and experience. She trusted this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere and appointed himself her protector. "I am terrified," she whispered. "Me too," Kane admitted. "But I would rather be terrified with you than safe and alone somewhere else." Without thinking, Amara reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. They stood there in the middle of the street, holding hands like young lovers instead of 2 people caught in a dangerous game. And for the first time in years, Amara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things could work out. "Come on," Kane said gently. "Let's get you back to the boarding house. I need to have a conversation with Marshall Taylor." The marshal was a weathered man in his 50s named Tom Taylor who listened to Kane's story with growing interest. When Kane finished, Marshal Taylor leaned back in his chair and studied Amara with shrewd eyes. "I knew Victor Reed," he said finally. "Knew he was involved in some shady dealings, but never could prove anything solid enough to make charges stick. If what you are saying is true, that these men were his partners in illegal activities, then Mrs. Reed here has every right to that money as his legal widow." "Can you keep them away from her?" Kane asked. Marshal Taylor scratched his jaw. "I can have a talk with Dutch Harrigan, make it clear that harassment of a widow is something I take seriously. But Kane, you know as well as I do that the law only stretches so far. If these men are determined, they will find a way around me." "Then I will just have to make sure I am around when they do," Kane said firmly. That evening, Kane took Amara to a small restaurant near the edge of town where they could talk privately. Over steak and potatoes, she finally told him the whole story about her marriage to Victor, about the abuse and fear, about finding him dead and taking the money before his partners could claim it. "I know it sounds terrible," Amara said, staring at her plate. "Taking money from a dead man. But I earned every dollar through 2 years of hell. He never gave me a penny of my own, never let me have any independence. When I found that safe open, I saw my chance and I took it." "You do not have to justify yourself to me," Kane said quietly. "A man who treats his wife like property does not deserve loyalty or mourning." Amara looked up, surprised by the vehemence in his tone. "Most people would say I should have stayed, tried to be a better wife, prayed harder. Most people are fools." Kane reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You survived, Amara. You got out. That takes more courage than most people ever have to find." The way he said her name, soft and reverent, made something inside her chest crack open. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Years of pain and fear and loneliness pouring out in quiet sobs. Kane moved his chair closer and pulled her against his shoulder, holding her while she cried, murmuring soothing words that she could not quite hear through her grief. When the storm passed, Amara pulled back, embarrassed by her display. "I am sorry. I do not usually fall apart like that." "You do not have anything to apologize for," Kane said, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was so tender it made her want to cry all over again. "You have been carrying a heavy burden by yourself for too long. It is all right to let someone else help hold the weight." "I do not know how to do that," Amara admitted. "Trust someone, I mean. Let them in." "Neither do I," Kane said with a wry smile. "I have spent most of my adult life drifting from one cattle drive to another, never staying anywhere long enough to form real connections. Easier that way, I told myself. Less risk of getting hurt." "What changed?" Amara asked softly. Kane's blue eyes met hers, and she saw something in them that made her heart race. "You did. The moment I caught you running from that saloon, something in me just knew that if I let you go, I would regret it for the rest of my life." "We barely know each other," Amara protested weakly. "I know you are brave and resilient. I know you have got a smile that could light up a whole room when you let yourself use it. I know that holding your hand feels more right than anything else I have ever done." He squeezed her fingers gently. "That is enough for me to want to know everything else." Amara felt the last of her walls beginning to crumble. This man, this unexpected cowboy with his easy confidence and protective instincts, was offering her something she had never had before. Genuine care with no strings attached, no expectations beyond simple human decency. "I want to know you too," she whispered. Kane's face broke into a grin that transformed him from handsome to devastating. "Then I guess we have got some time to spend together." Over the next week, Kane became a constant presence in Amara's life. He would arrive at the boarding house each morning, and they would spend the day together, walking around Columbia, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about learning to rope cattle before he could properly raid, about his father's death when Kane was 15, and how he had spent the next few years drifting, trying to figure out who he was. Amara found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, about her childhood in a St. Louis orphanage, about accepting Victor's marriage proposal, because it seemed like her only escape from a life of servitude, about the slow realization that she had traded one prison for another. "I used to dream about being someone different," she confessed one afternoon as they sat by the creek outside town. "Someone brave and free who made her own choices." "You are that person now," Kane pointed out. "You got free. You are making your own choices." "Am I?" Amara plucked at the grass beneath her. "Or am I just running scared, waiting for the next disaster?" Kane was quiet for a moment. "What would you do if Dutch and his men were not a threat anymore? If you could do anything, go anywhere, be anyone?" The question caught Amara off guard. She had been so focused on survival that she had not let herself think beyond the immediate danger. "I do not know," she admitted. "Maybe find a place to settle down, open a shop or a boarding house like Mrs. Chen's, something that is mine that no one can take away." "That sounds nice." Kane stretched out on the grass, his hat pulled low over his eyes. "I have been thinking maybe it is time I stopped drifting. Find a piece of land, build something permanent." Amara's heart skipped. Where were you thinking? California's got good ranch land. Plenty of opportunity for someone willing to work hard. He lifted his hat just enough to look at her. Colombia seems like a decent place to settle down. The implication hung between them, obvious and terrifying and thrilling all at once. Amara wanted to tell him yes, wanted to grab onto this chance for happiness with both hands, but fear held her back. Dutch is not going to give up, she said quietly. As long as I have that money, he is going to keep coming. Then maybe we need to deal with Dutch once and for all, Kane said, sitting up. Take away his reason for chasing you. How? Amara asked. Kane was thoughtful for a long moment. What if we could prove that the money was legally yours? Get something official from a judge. Make it clear that any attempt to take it would be theft. Victor never kept records of his legitimate business separate from his illegal dealings, Amara said. I would have to prove that the money in that safe was not stolen goods, and I cannot do that. But Dutch cannot prove it was stolen either, Kane pointed out. It is his word against yours, and you are a grieving widow while he is a known associate of a criminal. Seems to me a judge might be inclined to rule in your favor. Hope flickered in Amara's chest. You really think that would work? Only one way to find out. Kane stood and offered her his hand. Let's go talk to Marshal Taylor again, see if he knows a judge who might hear your case. Marshal Taylor directed them to Judge Harrison, a stern-faced man who had presided over Colombia's legal disputes for nearly a decade. He listened to Amara's story with growing interest, occasionally interrupting to ask pointed questions about Victor's business dealings and Dutch's claims to the money. This is a complicated situation, Judge Harrison said when she finished. Under California law, a widow is entitled to her husband's estate unless there is clear evidence that the property in question was obtained illegally. The burden of proof lies with Mr. Harrigan to demonstrate that this money was stolen. And if he cannot prove it, Kane asked, then Mrs. Reed keeps the money, and any attempt by Mr. Harrigan to take it by force would constitute robbery. Judge Harrison folded his hands on his desk. I am willing to issue a ruling to that effect, but I would need both parties present to hear the decision. Dutch will not come willingly, Amara said. Then Marshal Taylor will bring him not willingly, the judge said with a thin smile. I will schedule a hearing for 3 days from now. That should give the marshal time to locate Mr. Harrigan and his associates. They left the judge's office with cautious optimism. 3 days felt like an eternity when every shadow might hide one of Dutch's men, but Kane never left Amara's side. He moved into the boarding house, taking the room across the hall from hers and Mrs. Chen turned a blind eye to the unconventional arrangement. On the second night, Amara could not sleep. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the house settling, her mind racing with possibilities both hopeful and terrible. Finally, she gave up and padded quietly across the hall, knocking softly on Kane's door. He answered immediately, fully dressed despite the late hour. Could not sleep either, he asked, stepping back to let her in. Every time I close my eyes, I see Dutch's face, Amara admitted. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Kane guided her to the chair by the window and sat on the edge of the bed facing her. Talk to me. What are you afraid of? That the judge will rule against me, that Dutch will try to kill you. That even if we win in court, he will come after me anyway. She twisted her hands in her lap. That I will lose you before I ever really have you. You have me, Kane said quietly. However this plays out, whatever happens, you have me. Amara looked up at him, this man who had become everything to her in such a short time. I am falling in love with you, she whispered. And it terrifies me because I have never felt this way before, and I do not know how to protect myself if it all falls apart. Kane crossed the small distance between them and knelt in front of her chair, taking both her hands in his. "I am already in love with you, Amara. Have been since that first day, if I am being honest. And yes, it is terrifying, and yes, things might fall apart, but I would rather have this right now with you than play it safe and miss out on something extraordinary." "How can you be so certain?" Amara asked, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Because you are the first thing I think about when I wake up, and the last thing I think about before I sleep. Because when I imagine my future now, you are in every single picture. Because being with you feels like coming home after years of wandering." He reached up and cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I love you, Amara Reed. I love your strength and your vulnerability, your courage and your fear. I love all of you, and I will keep loving you no matter what tomorrow brings." Amara could not speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into that contact. Kane responded immediately, his arms coming around her as he deepened the kiss, and for a long moment the world narrowed down to just the two of them, two souls finding each other in the darkness. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Kane rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured. "I just want to hold you." Amara nodded, and they moved to the bed, lying down together fully clothed. Kane pulled her back against his chest, his arms wrapped securely around her, and for the first time since Victor's death, Amara felt completely safe. She must have dozed off, because she woke to early morning light and the sound of shouting from the street below. Kane was already up and at the window, his body tense. "What is it?" Amara asked, joining him. "Dutch and his men. Looks like they have decided not to wait for the judge's ruling." Kane grabbed his gun belt and strapped it on. "Stay here, I will handle this." "No," Amara caught his arm. "We face this together." Kane looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. "Together," he agreed. They went downstairs to find Mrs. Chen standing in the doorway, her small frame blocking the entrance. "I have sent my son for Marshal Taylor," she said calmly. "But these men say they will not leave without the woman." "Tell them the woman is not available," Kane said, moving to stand beside Mrs. Chen. Dutch's voice carried clearly from the street. "We know she is in there, Bishop. Send her out, and we will leave you and the old lady alone." "Not happening," Kane called back. "Judge Harrison is hearing this case tomorrow. You can wait for his ruling like civilized people." "Judge is not going to rule in her favor," Dutch shouted. "That money was earned through Victor's dealings with us. We have got as much right to it as she does." "Then let the judge decide that," Kane replied. There was a long silence, then the sound of guns being cocked. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. They were outnumbered and trapped, and Marshal Taylor might not arrive in time. Then Mrs. Chen did something unexpected. She stepped fully outside, her chin raised defiantly, and addressed the men in rapid Chinese. Amara could not understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. This was a woman who had survived far worse than a group of thugs, and she was not about to be intimidated. Whatever she said made Dutch hesitate. Then other doors along the street began to open, and people stepped out. Shopkeepers and miners, families and single men, Chinese and white and Mexican, all standing in solidarity with Mrs. Chen. Within minutes, Dutch and his 4 men were surrounded by at least 30 townspeople, all looking decidedly unfriendly. "This is not your fight," Dutch said, but his confidence had evaporated. "You threaten one of us, you threaten all of us," old Pete called from his spot in front of the general store. "Mrs. Chen is good people, and so is that cowboy. If they say the lady deserves protecting, that is good enough for us." Marshal Taylor arrived moments later, taking in the scene with a practiced eye. "Dutch Harrigan, You and your men are going to come with me. You can wait in jail for tomorrow's hearing, where you will have your chance to make your case legal-like." Dutch looked around at the circle of determined faces and seemed to realize he had lost. "This is not over," he muttered as the marshal and his deputy began confiscating weapons. "Actually, I think it is," Marshal Taylor said mildly. "Way I see it, you just attempted armed robbery in front of 30 witnesses. Judge is going to take that into account when he makes his ruling." They watched Dutch and his men being marched toward the jail, and Amara felt the tension drain from her body all at once. Kane caught her as her knees buckled, holding her steady. "It is all right," he murmured. "You are all right." Mrs. Chen turned to them with a satisfied smile. "Columbia takes care of its own," she said simply, then headed back inside to start breakfast. The hearing the next day was anticlimactic. Judge Harrison listened to Dutch's claims, asked pointed questions about his evidence, which Dutch could not provide without incriminating himself in illegal activities, and ruled that the money legally belonged to Amara as Victor Reed's widow. Dutch and his men were given a choice to leave California immediately or face charges for attempted robbery. They chose to leave. Amara walked out of the courthouse in a daze, clutching the official document that declared her the rightful owner of $15,000. It was over. After weeks of running and fear, it was finally over. Kane was waiting outside, leaning against a post with his hat pulled low. When he saw her, his face broke into that devastating grin. "How did it go?" "We won." Amara laughed, the sound slightly hysterical with relief. "We actually won." Kane swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, Amara grabbed his face and kissed him hard, not caring who saw or what they thought. "Marry me," Kane said when they broke apart. "I know it is fast and probably crazy, but marry me, Amara. Let's build that life we talked about together." "Yes," Amara breathed. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married a week later in Columbia's small church, with Mrs. Chen and Marshal Taylor standing as witnesses. Amara wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chen helped her sew, and Kane wore his best shirt and a new Stetson that he claimed was for special occasions. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kane kissed Amara like she was the most precious thing in the world. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness. They used part of Amara's money to buy a small ranch about 5 miles outside Columbia, 100 acres of good grazing land with a creek running through it, and a house that needed work but had good bones. Kane threw himself into fixing up the property, repairing fences and rebuilding the barn, while Amara focused on making the house a home. She planted a garden, sewed curtains for the windows, and slowly filled the empty rooms with furniture they bought or built themselves. Every evening, Kane would come in dusty and tired from a day's work, and Amara would have dinner waiting. They would eat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills and talk about their plans for the ranch. "I am thinking we could run cattle," Kane said one evening. "Maybe start with 50 head, see how it goes." "That sounds perfect," Amara agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "And maybe some chickens. I have always wanted chickens." "Then you will have chickens," Kane promised, kissing the top of her head. "Anything you want, sweetheart. This is our place, our life. We build it however we want." Their first winter was hard but joyful. Kane taught Amara how to ride properly, and she taught him how to bake bread. They worked side by side through cold mornings and long evenings, building something solid and real from nothing but determination and love. In the spring, Amara discovered she was pregnant. She told Kane one morning over breakfast, watching nervously as he processed the news. Then his face lit up with the most brilliant smile she had ever seen. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Amara asked, needing to hear him say it. Happy does not even begin to cover it. Kane pulled her into his lap, cradling her close. "You have given me everything, Amara. A home, a purpose, a family. I love you more than I have words to express." Their son was born in late autumn, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him James, after Kane's father, and he became the center of their world. Kane was a devoted father, somehow managing to balance ranch work with spending time with his son. Amara would often find them together in the barn, Kane talking to the baby about horses and cattle as if James could understand every word. "You are going to spoil him," Amara teased one afternoon, watching Kane rock their son to sleep. "That is my job as his father," Kane replied with dignity. "Spoiling him is in the contract." "What contract?" Amara laughed. "The one I signed when I married you. It clearly states that I am required to love you unconditionally and spoil any children we have." Kane grinned at her. "I take my contractual obligations very seriously." The ranch prospered over the next few years. Kane's reputation as an honest dealer spread, and soon they were selling cattle throughout California. Amara started raising chickens as she had wanted, and her eggs became popular in Colombia's markets. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men who treated Kane with respect and Amara with courtesy. When James was 3, Amara became pregnant again. This time she carried twins, girls who arrived early but healthy, with lungs that could wake the entire household when they decided they were hungry. Kane named them Sarah and Emma, and he somehow expanded his capacity for love to encompass 2 more tiny humans who had him wrapped around their fingers from day one. "I do not know how you do it," Amara said one evening, watching Kane juggle a fussing Sarah while reading a story to James and somehow keeping Emma from crawling into the fireplace. "You make it look so easy." "Are you joking?" Kane laughed. "I am held together by coffee and prayer, and even that is barely working." But he was happy, radiantly happy, and so was Amara. The fear and pain of her first marriage felt like a distant nightmare now, something that had happened to a different person. This life, this loud, chaotic, wonderful life with Kane and their children, was everything she had never dared to dream about. Mrs. Chen became a regular visitor, bringing treats for the children and helping Amara with the endless laundry that 3 small children generated. Marshall Taylor retired and moved to a small house near the ranch, claiming he wanted peace and quiet, but spending most of his time teaching James how to whittle. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Kane took Amara on a picnic to the spot where he had first told her he loved her, by the creek outside Columbia. The children were with Mrs. Chen for the afternoon, and they had a few precious hours alone. "I have been thinking," Kane said as they lay on a blanket watching clouds drift by, "about that first day when I caught you running from the saloon." "What about it?" Amara asked, turning to look at him. "You said you would only bring me trouble and sorrow," Kane said, his blue eyes soft with love. "And I said I would take whatever came with you." "I remember," Amara said quietly. "You were wrong," Kane said, reaching out to take her hand. "You brought me joy and purpose and a family I never thought I would have. You brought me home." Tears pricked Amara's eyes. "You saved me," she whispered. "I was so lost, Kane, and you found me." "We saved each other," Kane corrected gently. "You gave me a reason to stop drifting. I gave you a safe place to land. That is what love is, sweetheart. 2 people choosing each other every single day." Amara rolled over to kiss him, and they spent the afternoon talking and laughing and remembering all the moments that had brought them to this place. When they finally returned to the ranch, the sun was setting in brilliant streaks of orange and gold. The children were delighted to see them, James chattering excitedly about the cookie misses Chen had let him help make, while the twins toddled around showing off new bruises they had acquired in their adventures. Kane scooped up all three of them somehow, making them shriek with laughter, while Amara thanked Mrs. Chen for watching them. "You have a good life here, Mrs. Chen said, watching Kane play with the children. "You have built something beautiful." "We have," Amara agreed, "and I am grateful for it every single day." That night, after the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Amara and Kane sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. Kane had his arm around her shoulders and she leaned into his warmth, perfectly content. "What are you thinking about?" Kane asked softly. "How lucky I am," Amara replied. "How 5 years ago I was running scared with no hope and no future, and now I have everything I never knew I wanted." "Same here," Kane said. "You know, people used to tell me I was crazy for staying with you, for taking on your troubles. They said you would be nothing but problems." "And?" Amara asked, though she knew what he would say. "And they were idiots," Kane said firmly. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Amara Bishop. Every moment of trouble was worth it to get to spend my life with you." Amara turned in his arms and kissed him, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his and smiled. "I love you, Kane Bishop. I love you too, Amara Bishop, today and always." They sat together watching the stars come out. Two people who had found each other in the chaos and built something permanent from the ashes of their old lives. In the house behind them, their children slept safely, unaware of the dangers their parents had faced to create this sanctuary. James would grow up to be a rancher like his father, taking over the operation when Kane was ready to slow down. The twins would both marry good men and have families of their own, but would never stray far from the ranch that had been their childhood home. Kane and Amara would grow old together on that land they had built from nothing, surrounded by children and grandchildren, their love deepening with each passing year. On quiet evenings, they would sit on that same porch and remember the day a desperate woman running from danger had collided with a cowboy who decided she was worth fighting for. "You ever regret it?" Amara would ask sometimes, usually when the arthritis in Kane's hands made ranch work difficult, or when money was tight, or when life threw them one of its inevitable challenges. And Kane would always answer the same way, pulling her close and kissing her temple. "Not for a single second. I told you I would take whatever came with you, and I meant it. You are my greatest adventure, Amara. Everything else is just details." They lived long, full lives, Kane making it to 78 and Amara to 76. When Kane passed away peacefully in his sleep, Amara held his hand and thanked him for every moment they had shared. She followed him 6 months later, and they were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a pair of oak trees that provided shade in summer and shelter in winter. Their children gathered around those graves often, bringing grandchildren and great-grandchildren to hear stories about the woman who had run from danger and the cowboy who had caught her, about how love and courage had built something permanent from chaos, about how two people choosing each other every day could create a legacy that lasted generations. The ranch remained in the family for over 100 years, a testament to what Kane and Amara had built together. And though the world changed around it, though Colombia evolved from a rough mining town to a tourist destination, the love story that had started with a collision in an alley and a simple promise remained unchanged. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from taking a chance on someone who needs you as much as you need them, and choosing to face whatever comes together rather than safe and alone. Their story became something of a legend in Colombia, The tale told and retold of the widow running from her past and the cowboy who had looked at her and seen a future. Young couples would visit the ranch sometimes, standing at the graves and hoping some of that enduring love would rub off on them. And if you listened carefully on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right across those California hills, some swore you could still hear laughter drifting from that old ranch house, the sound of a family built on love and stubbornness, and the simple decision to take whatever came as long as they could face it together. That was the true ending of their story, not in the dramatic confrontations or the legal victories, but in the quiet accumulation of ordinary moments that made up a life. Breakfast at the kitchen table, children playing in the yard, hands held on the porch at sunset, and two souls who had found each other in the darkness and built their own light. Kane had been right that first day. Amara had not brought him trouble and sorrow. She had brought him everything that mattered, everything that made life worth living. And in return, he had given her safety and love and the freedom to become the person she was always meant to be. It was a simple story in many ways, reduced to its essential elements. Two people who chose each other against the odds, who built something lasting from nothing but determination and love, who raised a family and created a legacy that outlived them both. But in that simplicity lay something profound, a truth that resonated across generations. Love was not about perfect circumstances or easy choices. It was about looking at someone and deciding they were worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth building a life with regardless of what challenges might come. It was about keeping promises even when they were hard, about showing up day after day, about choosing partnership and trust over fear and isolation. Kane and Amara had learned those lessons the hard way, through danger and uncertainty and moments when giving up would have been easier. But they had persevered, and in doing so had created something beautiful and enduring. Their children told the story to their own children, and the tale evolved with each telling, but the core remained the same. A woman who said she would bring only trouble and sorrow. A cowboy who said he would take whatever came with her. And a love that proved strong enough to overcome anything life threw at them. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the money or the ranch or even the children, though all of those things were precious. What mattered was the choice they had made on a dusty street in Columbia, California in 1878, to trust each other enough to see where that trust might lead. It had led to everything. To a life rich with meaning and connection. To children and grandchildren who carried their love forward into the future. To a legacy that lasted long after they were gone. And somewhere in the hills above that old ranch, if you believed in such things, two spirits still walked hand in hand, forever young, forever in love, forever grateful for the day they had collided in an alley and decided to build a life together. That was the true happy ending, not perfect but real, not easy but earned, not flashy but profound. Two people who had loved each other well and raised a family and built something lasting. Two people who had kept their promises to each other through everything life brought them. Two people who had proven that sometimes the best response to trouble and sorrow is simply to say yes. I will take whatever comes, as long as I can face it with you.